that turned up, the man turns up. Okay, first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to this third History Festival. And the venue keeps changing. The venues keep getting better and better every year, I have to say. I'm just wondering how many places have we like this in County Carlow. But I'm your chair here today, Tommy Graham, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first speaker here, Paul Horan. Paul Horan he's a professor of nursing, I think it is. That's why he's at a history festival. Okay, you definitely can hear me now. Right. No, it gives me particular pleasure to be here because it also gives me an opportunity to plug the latest issue of History Ireland, of which I am editor, because Paul has an article in it, and he'll be addressing a similar topic here today. He's going to look at the very first Parliament in Ireland, which was held in Castledermot in 1264. I'm intrigued, Paul, but maybe I'm not intrigued because I've read the article already, but I'm sure you're going to tell us more. So, Paul, take it from there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. As Tommy said, history's not my first love, but it's something that I've always been curious about. On New Year's Day this year, I was sitting at home like an anorak thinking, God, I wonder what anniversaries are happening this year. And we've had the whole Normandy thing over the last couple of days, D-Day, and various other things. And I found this curious kind of Castledermot 1264, and I did some sums in my head, and I went, oh, that's interesting. That's going to be the 750th anniversary. And it's not something really that's well known that Castledermot was where a first sitting of a gathering to call itself a parliament in Ireland actually sat. And my family are all from around Castledermot, and last year I'd managed to get all my family together and relay the story of my family back to 1767. So I kind of got the history book at that stage. And I decided, okay, let's see what we can find out and go digging. So I went to a colleague of mine in Trinity and I said, look, have you gotten on this? He said, well, no, there's not really a lot written about it. He said, to be honest, there's not much out there. And I thought maybe because of the Four Courts thing, with regard to all the documents being blown up, and this is my curious link to the story. And I thought, yeah, and then he come back with this document in Latin. And it tells us in the Latin document that an inquisition happened at the Parliamentum de Castledermot di Mercury Proximo post festum Sancto Trinitas Anno Regino Domini Regis Henrici Quadrissimo Octavo Coram Domino, and the fellow in charge is a fellow called Ricardo de Rapella. And I'll translate that into English in simple terms. Basically, the Parliament happened 750 years ago on a Wednesday after the Feast of the Holy Trinity on the 18th of June 1264. It happens this year on a Wednesday after the Feast of the Holy Trinity on the 18th of June as well, which is quite a strange coincidence because those Easter feasts are movable depending on lunar cycles and whatever, which is quite interesting. Anyway, so to cut a long story short, that was put in front of me, that's what he gave me, just marked it out, and I thought, well, we need to get this translated. And I searched around with my colleagues and I said, look, I want to find out what happened. Imagine having an original record. Guys in Leinster House sometimes don't have records of what happened last week. And you now have a record of something that happened 750 years ago. I'm not getting into, the details of certain things that have happened. And the irony is that the Chief Justice was there, and we all know what's been going on with regard to our own justice system, and that's not for today. So I asked a colleague of mine in Trinity to translate it, and whatever. And then suddenly we found a book from 1951, where someone else had done it already, and translated it all into English. So now we can tell from this from this translation and the article that I've written, we know who was there, we know the names of all the knights, we know what they were doing, etc. Now, it's really quite interesting from the point of view, it was like a meeting of the Public Accounts Committee in today's terms. There's a bit of a row going on as to whether the king had the rights to escheat, which means basically whether he had the rights over the diocese in Glendalough and Dublin. And that's another piece of the story that's quite interesting. You often wonder, why do you have Christchurch in Dublin and St Patrick's Cathedral, two cathedrals? The reason was it's a united diocese, so it's a diocese of Glendalough and Dublin. So that's why there's actually two cathedrals there. The Archbishop was a curious kind of guy, fascinating. He really got me attention. It would appear that this guy, his name was Fulk Bassett, or Fulk de Sandford. You need to be careful how you say that after a few drinks, because it would sound quite strange. And he would appear to be the bastard son of a Bishop of London. And it's from him that we have this original record, because he didn't trust his mates, yeah? So he got one of his chroniclers to chronicle what happened. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting, and everything is going well. And then I go, well, I wonder if the original manuscript of that is in the diocese. I wonder if it's in the treasury in Christchurch or whatever. And I was at home on a Sunday, and I just put a Google search, swear to God, Google search, bang, Black Book of Christchurch, Lever Niger, comes up, National Library of Ireland. It's in the treasury in Christchurch. The original manuscript is lying on display quite commonly. So I got on to the RCB library, and I said to them, any chance I can have a look at this? And it turns out that it is in existence, and it's there, and I had it in my hands about 7 or 8 weeks ago, and they very kindly allowed me to take images of it, which are in the journal, which is fantastic. And as well as that, they brought out another book, which was the Liber Alani, which is a Tudor version of the same thing, but much more beautiful than the original, and very readable and very visible. But what we found out then was, we have the original record, but there's loads of writing in the margins. And nobody has translated the writing in the margins. So that's the next bit of my quest with regard to that. So why an interest in this at all? And I'll tell you about the Knights in a minute. Well, you see, I thought, like everybody else, a lot of this stuff was blown up in 1922. But as it happens, my granduncle Ned was in the forecourts in 1922 when it was blown sky high. So I feel that this act of me unearthing the manuscripts is a curious act of family atonement. God bless you, Uncle Ned. And not only did I find out about all these manuscripts in Castledermot and the Parliament, but then I unearthed a picture of the bold Uncle Ned sitting on the back of an armoured car with Tom Barry in the forecourts in 1922. Just pass that around, and a beautiful image that Tommy helped me unearth of what looks like Dublin's Hiroshima. It's a beautiful mushroom cloud over the forecourts, in which contains 700 years of all the manuscripts, etc. Now, I'm not going to stand here and rehearse the Civil War and blame who did and who didn't and whatever. But what I will tell you is, what I now know is they were both to blame. Both sides were to blame for the destruction of the manuscripts, for 2 reasons. The first reason is the fact that, yes, there were 2 lorry loads of Castledermot in the yard. Yes, the boys, the anti-treaty guys were holding their stuff in, they had all their ammunition in the treasury. Now, the treasury was very well designed. It was designed to be fireproof and waterproof. It wasn't bomb-proof, right? And what actually happened was that this is my take on it. I've done a lot of reading and a lot of talking to people. Basically, you've got field artillery in the centre of the city, and they're not really good at it, yeah? And eventually they get their ordnance correct, and they send ordnance into the forecourts, and if you've got a lorry load of Castledermot out in the yard and a bomb blows up beside it, you're going to have a bit of a bang. So I'm not saying that either party are guilty. What I am saying to you, and I'll move on in a few minutes to talk about Carlow, I'm going to give you a web address. All this is at your fingertips. It's brilliant. A colleague of mine who helped me with this is a guy by the name of Dr. Peter Crooks, and he spent an awful long time putting this online. And the web address is www.chancery.ie. And you can go in there and put in Carlow, Castledermot, and it will give you all the records from the archives, from the contemporaneous records that they've spent the last 40 years gathering from all over the world, and you can search this and read it all for yourself. Now, the original stuff, this is new, the 1264 stuff wasn't there. They didn't believe that a record or manuscript exists until my recent research uncovered those manuscripts. So basically that's important, that you can go in there and you can look. Castledermot, like the notion of Parliament, Parliament was an itinerant thing. It wasn't. We see capitals in parliaments, but back then, Naas often held a parliament, Castledermot held a parliament. Do you want to know where the parliament was held in Castledermot, or where we think it was held? It was actually held in what is now the Leinster Arms pub, right? Or that's what they seem to tell us. So we know who was there and what they were all about. So I've told you a little bit about the forecourts, the barn, tracing the manuscripts, which was great fun. I'll never forget as well being in the RCB library that day, and it's a great story to be able to tell to my own students that referencing is really important, because I had the reference for the folio and everything was grand, and I'm delighted. I was going, yeah, got it. And the next thing, I went to page, it was 61, 62, and page, the folio I wanted was 63. It was missing. But it was missing on the basis of the way it had been referenced incorrectly. There were actually 2 paginations, and after an hour and a half scouring this document looking for another pagination, I found it. But at that point I was going, imagine getting so close to something that important and not being allowed to actually have it. So basically, the 2 chronicling archbishops I've spoken about, Fulk de Bassett, great guy, fascinating guy. These archbishops had huge powers. They were basically kings in their own domain. They could do everything, chop your head off, charge you taxes, whip you, throw you in jail, everything. They were bad. But the king was very clever, because what he used to do was, when he was fighting a war, and there was a city of vacante, like you have with the Pope and that stuff, all those revenues went to the king. So when there was no archbishop, all his revenues went back to the king. So the king used to say, well, I'm leaving that seat vacant for a wee while, I've a bit of a fight over there in France. So what happened at the time was a fella by the name of Richard of Norwich was appointed by the local chapter to be the archbishop, but this other fella went